During the colonial period from 1532 to 1821, over 100,000 enslaved Africans were imported to Peru. Haciendas along the Pacific coast were the principal destination for most, although agricultural, mining, and textile production in the highlands also demanded enslaved labor. The viceregal capital Lima was a center dominated by a majority Afro-descendant population throughout the colonial era, among enslaved and free peoples, including many of mixed ancestry. In the 2017 census, 3.6% of the national population of nearly 33 million self-identified as primarily of African descent, although independent estimates are often much higher when considering African ancestry among the mestizo population. Despite the demographics and cultural impact of Peru's sub-Saharan African heritage, the country shares a colonial legacy with other states throughout Latin America, a legacy which has rendered the Afro-descendant population and reality invisible and marginal to national identity and social equity in favor of a dominant mestizo national character. In contrast to the Circum-Caribbean and Brazil, the African-descended population of the Pacific littoral of South America has been particularly abstracted from the emergence of Afro-Atlantic diasporic consciousness, arising in response to political movements based on international Black identity. Peru's Ministry of Culture has found a continued, quote, situation of vulnerability, invisibility, and structural inequality that generates a negative impact on the full exercise of the Afro-descendant population's rights and access to services, such that there is, as a consequence, a process of stagnation in their integral development and social inclusion, end quote. Afro-Peruvian activists attribute the systematic lack of attention to the problems of this vulnerable population to the limits of how Afro-Peruvian identity is understood and the legacies of colonialism that have institutionalized inequities and anti-Blackness within the country. These activists point to a history of scholarship and activism, beginning with the Afro-Peruvian cultural revival of the 1950s through 60s, led by the sibling scholar, artist, activists Nicomedes and Victoria Santa Cruz, having profound social impact in increasing Afro-Peruvian visibility. These activists identify a partial solution in greater national and international visibility through a partnership between communities, activists, and scholars. Archaeology has an important role to play, especially in a country where archaeology has been central in the development of national identity. In recent years, historical archaeology has matured as a discipline in Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, and Andean Chile, Argentina, and Colombia, with an explosion of new research by both foreign and national archaeologists. Andean historical archaeology offers a way of bridging diverse data sets and connecting the deep past to the ethnographic present, especially given the region's rich ethnographic, ethnohistorical, and pre-Columbian archaeological records. However, research on the African diaspora in Western and Andean South America has only accounted for a fraction of this new turn toward historical archaeology. In 2009, I established the Haciendas of Nasca Archaeological Project, Fhon, as the first archaeological project in Peru focused on the African diaspora. The project, carried out in collaboration with community partners in El Ingenio, Changuillo, and Palpa, has revealed much about the daily experience of the large enslaved population at two Jesuit vineyard haciendas of Nasca, San Josef and San Francisco Javier. More recently, Luis Santa Cruz and Claire Mas have conducted community-engaged bioarchaeological research on the enslaved at the cemetery of the Hacienda La Quebrada, an historic sugar plantation located in the central coastal valley of Cañete. However, due to the widespread nature of slavery and the African diaspora in Peru's past, turning our attention to legacy collections from excavations throughout the country offers the possibility to substantially increase our understanding of Afro-diasporic lifeways and material culture from a comparative purview. Since at least the 1970s, archaeological interventions in Lima's historic city center have yielded material evidence of the substantial African presence in the former viceregal capital. However, this archaeology has mostly been carried out as part of contract projects in the rehabilitation of historic sites and monuments, and these interventions have not been aimed at understanding the materiality of the African descendant experience or urban slavery. Here, we make the case that there are sufficient legacy collections and evidence from reports and historical documentation for a comparative archaeology of slavery in Peru. To demonstrate this point, we return to the data from excavations at Lima's Casa Bodega Quadra, a site museum directed by my co-author, Miguel Fhon. Bodega Quadra was first the site of an early colonial butcher's shop, worked by enslaved Africans, and later the site of an elite residence with enslaved domestic workers and artisans. We also place these findings in conversation with results of Fhon's archaeological interventions at rural estates on the south coast. The preliminary results of these efforts point to the fruitful possibilities of comparative archaeology of slavery at rural and urban locations in Peru. Like many of its contemporary leading coastal cities in the early modern New World, Lima was a black metropolis. Enslaved and free Africans and their descendants accompanied the first waves of conquistadores, but were still a small minority when Lima was founded in 1535. The vast majority of imported enslaved Africans were destined for rural coastal estates, although demand grew over the course of the 16th century, especially for skilled tradesmen and domestics. By the beginning of the 17th century, Lima, the city of kings, was a city of Afro-descendants, with free and enslaved Afro-Andeans outnumbering Spaniards and native Andeans. Figures sent to the crown by the Archdiocese of Lima in 1636 recorded nearly 54% of the total population of the city as belonging to African-descended Casa categories. Nearing the end of the colonial period, the experience of the majority of enslaved Afro-descendants had shifted markedly from rural agro-industrial labor on haciendas to urban life. Both enslaved and free African descendants became increasingly in demand in domestic labor in the city's mansions, as well as the trades, working as tailors, shoemakers, barbers, potters, carpenters, muleteers, carriage drivers, among others. They also worked in activities such as bricklaying, butchering, street vending, and working in public taverns. While most enslaved individuals resided at the residence or estate of their enslaver, many of Lima's enslaved benefited from the institution of jornal, paying for their manumission over time. So-called esclavos jornaleros reserved the right to live in their own homes, leading to the establishment of Black and Afro-descendant urban communities that cut across the legal lines of free and enslaved. In 2004 and 2005, an urban renewal program carried out by the Metropolitan Municipality of Lima in the second block of Huron Ancash, formerly the Calle del Rastro de San Francisco, in Lima's historic city center, allowed for the conservation and restoration of several large colonial and early Republican homes built on the Remax River ravine. These properties included the Casa de las Trece Puertas, Casa del Balcón Ecléctico, Casa Mendoza, Casa del Rastro, and Casa Bodega Quadra. During these interventions, the latter property presented abundant evidence of archaeological material, leading to the development of two archaeological projects at the Casa Bodega Quadra. The first was directed by Daniel Guerrero in 2005, and the second by my co-author Miguel Fhon in 2010, leading to the consolidation of the property as an archaeological site museum in 2012. During both stages of archaeological excavations at the site, a large amount of animal bone was recovered, amounting to 12% of the material from the interventions of the first research project and 24% of the material of the second. This faunal material corresponds to fragments of mandibles, dentition, and crania of a variety of domestic animals for consumption. The bone fragments were distributed in greater proportion in the eastern sector of the house lot, with the enclosures adjoining the La Moraya housing complex and the area corresponding to the cutwater passage adjacent to the north wall of the lower part of the Casa Bodega Quadra, and the cutwater wall buttressing the Remac River. The abundance of domestic faunal material from the Casa Bodega Quadra lot, as well as the archaeological monitoring of the construction of a housing complex within the Rastro de Soledad block, complements the existing historical documentation of the city's early colonial butchery and slaughterhouse at the site. Setting aside land for a municipal meat market had been discussed by the city council at cabildo meetings as early as August 1536. However, it wasn't until January 1552 that the council, under the leadership of Mayor Martin Pizarro, established the butcher shops, fish market, and slaughterhouse along the river ravine of the Calle del Rastro de San Francisco, adjacent to the Plaza Mayor, but not so close as to attract flies, buzzards, and other pests that might disturb the business of government and the activities of the cathedral. The books of the Cabildo of Lima, dated 7 April 1552, record the purchase by the city of an enslaved butcher to serve in the official capacity as municipal butcher at the newly established Rastro de San Francisco Butchery and Slaughterhouse. The butcher, named Anton, was purchased by the city from Alvaro Galan at the price of 400 pesos. But because the management of the butcher shop was indispensable for the city, he was manumitted on the condition of his public employment. The ongoing analysis of faunal materials overseen by Fhon at the Casa Bodega Quadra collection pertaining to the 16th century butchery will contribute important insight to foodways and consumption patterns in Lima, as well as early colonial black labor. By the end of the 17th century, the elite domestic construction within the block expanded across the lots, building over the butchery. By this time, domestic service by enslaved people had greatly increased across the city, employing enslaved labor in elite homes, monasteries, and hospitals. For the first time, the urban demand for enslaved labor entered competition with the haciendas of the viceroyalty. In the 18th century, the Bodega Quadra family held a number of enslaved persons devoted to domestic service. In 1728, the dowry for the wedding of Francisca de Moenedo y Losada to Tomás de la Bodega Quadra, which solidified the family's relationship to one of the oldest and most prominent families of the Limeña aristocracy, included an enslaved man valued at 500 pesos. The couple's will, scripted in 1763, made provisions to settle a debt owed to Francisca's sister, Juana de Moenedo, in the amount of 1,922 pesos, 4 reales, for the purchase of enslaved domestics, and another 600 pesos owed for an enslaved person purchased from the estate of their mother, Josefa Losada. At the Bodega Quadra home, enslaved women were charged with cooking, childcare, laundry, and maintaining the household. Enslaved men would have driven the carriage and assisted Don Tomás with his trade as a merchant. As revealed through documentation of urban households across the viceroyalty, urban elites also often held enslaved tradesmen at their homes. Evidence of small-scale pottery production in the form of pottery wheels, kiln furniture, and ceramic wasters at the Casa Bodega Quadra suggests that the enslaved tradesmen in the employ of the family may have included at least one potter. Urban slavery and production by enslaved tradesmen contrasts with the large Jesuit vineyard haciendas of Nasca, most readily in terms of scale. By the time of the Jesuit expulsion in 1767, San Josef and San Javier were the largest and most profitable vineyards in the viceroyalty, each with around 300 enslaved individuals. Our surveys have mapped hacienda's spatial configurations, the 2 hacienda cores, and many other annexes throughout the Ingenio and Grande river valleys, and our excavations have targeted enslaved domestic spaces and middens, workshops, botilla kilns, and a brandy distillery. Adolescent unmarried enslaved residents inhabited gender-segregated slave barracks, while families resided in their own simple homes, sweeping domestic trash into shared middens between houses. Because enslaved individuals dominated the estates in the 17th and 18th centuries, compared to temporary indigenous or mestizo migratory laborers, all the material culture in these middens can be attributed to African-descended enslaved residents, revealing much about the particularities of their foodways, possessions, and material habits. Enslaved creativity and resourcefulness are particularly revealed in foodways, especially in the production of one-pot meals and stews. The Jesuit administration regularly gifted the enslaved high-quality Maiolica diningware, a pattern we have discussed as part of a suite of practices establishing the aesthetics of a client-patron relationship and more broadly, a strategy of enslaved labor as a specific form of Christian discipline, echoed in the built environment and the dominance of the chapels on the hacienda landscape. A significant challenge to the archaeological study of urban slavery is the manner in which refuse was discarded at elite households. The materials recovered from such middens are not limited to one social stratum of the household, and because enslaved persons use similar material culture as other household members, specific behavioral patterns are difficult to reconstruct. Despite these challenges, an historical archaeology that takes into account the built environment, relevant material culture, and historical documentation reveals much about the nature of urban enslaved discipline. While the Jesuit administration of the Nasca haciendas made use of tactics of spatial and ideological discipline, households in Lima, which brought enslaved and free persons of various castas into close quarters, relied on the threat of physical violence to maintain order. From 1536 onward, the books of Lima's Cabildo are replete with codes meting out lashings and other corporal sanctions for various infractions, often dispensed at double for black residents as compared to indigenous subjects, and up to 100 lashes for minor crimes. The excavations at Casa Bodega Quadra recovered metal star points, suggesting the use of the scourge in corporal discipline. Urban life was also paradoxical, and that there was both constant surveillance at elite residences and the possibility to pass into the anonymity of crowds and opportunities to form community beyond the household. During time away from the household, the enslaved partook in the rites and events of confraternities, attended dances in public plazas, and met in public chicha taverns to drink and engage in conversation. They also participated in market life, purchasing and selling goods. Among the goods acquired were tobacco pipes. 3 complete ceramic pipe bowls that resonate with Afro-Atlantic aesthetics were recovered from contexts across the site. These bear punctated motifs and incised and low-relief annular and diagonal lines. Another pipe is glazed in a Baroque tin enamel maiolica motif, suggestive of local manufacture in the city. These 4 contrast with 2 mostly complete Kaolin pipes associated with elite smoking culture in the Viceroyalty. The technical reports from other archaeological interventions in Lima also mention the recovery of Afro-Atlantic smoking equipment. As early as 1981, excavators at Lima's Casa identified a number of such pipes. Tobacco and brandy were often gifted as rewards to the enslaved at both urban and rural contexts. The accounting books of the Nasca Haciendas suggest this distribution was a regular event. However, the Nasca estates contrast with Bodega Quadra in that only 2 pipe bowl sherds have thus far been recovered, leading to the interpretation that African-style pipe bowls were rare at these estates and signified the elevated status of their enslaved owners, while most smoked rolled tobacco. One of the most surprising finds at the Casa Bodega Quadra associated with Afro-descendant material culture is a tiny ceramic whistle modeled in the form of a human head. The small personal object is as of yet of unknown use and manufacture, but resembles the aesthetics of West and West Central African whistles, which incorporate anthropomorphic figures, especially in the sculpted hairstyle, coffee bean eyes, and pursed lips. Was the object of spiritual significance? Was it practical, its owner blowing it while guarding the house? Did its owner play it as a musical instrument? Or perhaps all 3? At the site of San Josef de la Nasca, a huiro, which for modern residents its form resembles a whale or serpent, was found in association with the Botija kiln complex. The location of this gourd rasping instrument suggests the interrelation and importance of rhythm to everyday work. Although distinct, the 2 personal objects share a potential to reveal something important about the enslaved sonic praxis across rural and urban contexts. While here we present cursory results of a return to a legacy collection from one of Lima's many urban archaeological projects, we have demonstrated the potential for a comparative archaeology of slavery in Peru. Enslaved and free Africans and their descendants were omnipresent in colonial Lima and coastal estates, and made up important minority populations in many other regions of the Viceroyalty. Since the 1980s, a number of historical projects have been excavated in Lima. Together with a return to the archives, the collections and reports generated from these projects could offer an important comparative window into enslaved life in the viceregal capital. The experience of slavery, of course, took many forms. It is not sufficient to limit the archaeological perspective to rural estates. Thank you very much for viewing our presentation, and we look forward to your comments and the discussion at the IAS virtual live session. We'd also like to thank the communities of Changuillo, Palpa, and El Ingenio for their continued support of Fhon, and also to the staff at the Bodega Quadra Site Museum, Municipality of Lima, and M. Lima S.A. Gracias.